Hello everyone, this is Mirko Guerrini and I welcome you to the Jazz Transcription Clinic, a monthly interviews podcast where we talk with accomplished jazz doctors about their lives, career and their personal secrets on the art of transcribing. If you want to improve at jazz, stay tuned and follow the Jazz Transcription Clinic on the socials for more content. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which this podcast is being recorded. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and the Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here today. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Jazz Transcription Clinic. Guest doctor for today in the clinic is one of the most acclaimed Canadian saxophone players and educators, Remi Bolduc. Welcome, Remi, and thanks for joining us for another episode.
Thank you. Thank you, Mirko, for inviting me.
Now, Remi is a very important figure in Canadian jazz and North American jazz. He has played with a number of incredible people, and he is also a very, very active educator and also a very, very active jazz transcriber. So I think I'm very happy and also very honored to have you as a guest on my podcast. So thanks again for joining.
Thank you.
So I've seen a lot of your videos on YouTube, and I also try to study some of them. Some of them are, a little bit easier to approach, but some of them are extremely difficult. And I was impressed by the fact that sometimes you are not scared even to transcribe different instruments from just the saxophone. Recently I was watching that really great transcription of yours of Olio played by Joshua Redman and Brad Meldau, and there is the whole transcription of the both of the instruments that you made. So the first question for me to ask, and I'll be very curious, is why you do transcribe?
Okay, well, first, it changed over the years. When I was younger, I learned jazz pretty much from listening to records. There was not much jazz taught in the universities in Quebec, anyhow. In those days, in the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s, you had to learn a lot from playing in the clubs and basically listening to record. So that's how I started, listening to Charlie Parker, transcribing, and then transcribing other players as well, just to understand, what was happening. And I did that, and I guess eventually, nowadays it's more of a hobby. Honestly, I transcribe. It's really a hobby, and now it's kind of a project I took, to transcribe the whole Charlie Parker recording, repertoire. But other than that, it's sometimes personal challenges I give myself. It helps me, to hear more things. It develops my ears, and but also it is something I do for fun. I think that in life, we tend to do things that we're good at. If you're young and you're at school and you're good in sport, you'll tend to want to do more sports. If you're good in music, it's like you do more music. So when I started transcribing, of course it's challenging, but it was something that I felt was a bit easier for me than maybe others around me, and it kind of encouraged me to do it, So same thing with playing the saxophone, playing jazz improvisation. I felt, that I had a certain talent, and of course doesn't mean I didn't work hard. But so basically my short answer would be that it kind of came pretty easy to me, and I did it to learn. But eventually, it developed into something else. At my age now, when I listen to Charlie Parker, I don't need to write those solo. I mean, most of the time I know what he's playing. So I write it. It's for me, but for the community also, and to keep alive that part of his playing and to help people to recognize and understand his process, you know. So there is kind of like, since I'm teaching at McGill, I'm head of the jazz department over there. And it's important for me to, to share, you know, that's part of teaching.
Yes. And you said you started very early, I mean, together with learning improvisation, but you also said you have been encouraged to do that. So was it your teacher at that time that encouraged you and suggested you should transcribe some jazz solos? And what did you expect to bring home? Like, what did you expect to achieve from a transcription?
Right. You know, it is not actually my teachers or my peers that encouraged me to do that. When I was 15, I was playing in some bands, playing, you know, a professional band, but not jazz, you know, dance and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I remember having to learn. I mean, I remember in high school learning the In the Mood solo because we're playing in the band, and that version, the band. And there was no solo part in that arrangement. Yeah. So I transcribed the solo and I told my teacher I can play, you know, the whole solo. And that was kind of like, you know, one of the first one. And then a friend of mine at the time, that Luc Beaugrand, taught me about improvisation and told me I should listen to Charlie Parker. So I listened to that and I just, you know, wanted to know what he was playing, so I just learned it on the sax now.
Yeah.
So so it's just something that came natural for me.
Do you have perfect pitch?
No, I don't. No, I don't at all.
Lucky.
And, so, yeah, but I don't. I mean, you know, when I transcribe, I mean, I don't use my instrument because I just basically put it right on the piano. On the, you know, I listen and I put it down. But I mean, sometimes when it's chords and that kind of thing, I mean, it takes me forever, you know, and I'm sure there is tons of mistakes in what I do. But I think that's important for someone that wants to transcribe, to not scare away from making mistakes. I mean, it's more about the process. You know, you get better. If I revisit some of my old transcription, I probably find a lot of mistakes, and that's okay. I'm not scared of that. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah, so this is an interesting point because to me, I remember I first started transcribing because my teacher at that time said, "Oh, if you want to learn, you know, the jazz language, if you want to improve even your timing, your tone, your articulation, you should transcribe." So I started doing that, but I was terrible at the start. When I started, my first solos were full of mistakes, as you said. But then I kept doing and doing and doing it. And I got to the point where I don't have perfect pitch either, but I am now able to transcribe any like saxophone solo without the saxophone, because maybe I have developed a sort of good relative pitch, especially for saxophones.
Right.
Now, if I transcribe like a guitar solo, maybe I have to check the notes here and there. But with the saxophone, especially tenor, which is the one who I transcribe the most, with tenor, I just hear the notes, because the sound, each note becomes a unique sound with a unique color. So,
well, you have more ear than me.
No, I just, you know, developed by doing it and doing and doing and doing it. It's a real trial and error process.
But it was the same for me. I mean, when I started, I made mistakes and I did solos. I remember trying to transcribe I Want to Talk About You, John Coltrane cadenza, when I was, like, you know, one of my first solos. There was no way I could transcribe that, you know. But I mean, there was nobody there to tell me it was wrong or right. I just figured it was too hard for me. So I moved to an easier solo, and then once in a while came back, you know, then left. I remember doing John Coltrane on Marsh on the album Interstellar Space. And it took me like a few time to go back to it. Eventually, I'm like, okay, I can start figure it out now with all the false fingering, overtones, and how it works, you know. But that never discouraged me. Like it did not for you either. We just, you know, it's part of the process. Yeah. But I mean, one important thing for me is that, I mean, you'll hear many great players. I heard great players saying, and we often have guests at McGill, and many of, not many, but some of them would say, don't transcribe ever. You know, you should not transcribe. I mean, I noticed that in music, there is two elements that are pretty polarizing. It's transcription and metronome. Like, you'll have players saying, never transcribe, or you should transcribe, or never play with the metronome, or always play with the metronome. Yeah. It's like those two things, people get very emotive about that, you know? And I understand. I mean, some great players, they never transcribe, but of course they listen to music, and they often played with great players, and they have great ear, you know? So they just listen, and sometimes they'll sing or they'll play along, and that's enough for them. And I met, I mean, players like Joe Lovano. Yeah. Joe Lovano said in the masterclass, never transcribe, you know? But I remember I was teaching at Banff, and Joe was teaching there as well. And he told the student, he said, never, ever transcribe. And after I asked him at dinner, I say, so you never transcribe? You say, no, but I listen to a lot of music, and I can sing like many solos, like Charlie Parker's solo. Well, I said, that's a kind of transcription, right? Like if I can sing a solo, I can play it. I mean, and you, Joe Lovano, so you can do it too. So, you know, sometimes it could be misleading for somebody that doesn't have that level of the ear, you know. Some of us need to, you know, like there was somebody that came at McGill, said, never transcribe. Check this out. He said, never transcribe to the student. And he said, I never transcribe. And he's a very good player, you know. And he said, but let me try something. There is a solo of Clifford Brown that I like to listen to, and I never played it. And he took his instrument and he played it. He said for the first time. Yeah. I mean, can you do that? You know, it's like he never transcribed it. He just remembered and he played it. I mean, yeah, if you can do that, you don't need to transcribe. So sometimes I just want to say that you don't need to transcribe, you know, not everybody needs to. And it's like you don't, I mean, I met great players that never played with a metronome. And they're amazing, and older players, you know, very good, you know. A piano player that played with Roy Haynes, he said, I never play with a metronome. You go on stage and, you know, you try to get the right groove, you know. And I can totally understand that. It depends, you know. If you live in a small town, you're all by yourself, you never play with great musicians, you don't hear great music, you don't listen to music, you never transcribe, never practice with the metronome, chances are you're going to be stuck at your level. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, transcribing is not a faith, or it's not a religion. You know, that we need to follow.
Some people think it is for me because I transcribe hundreds of solo, but it's really not. You know, like it's really not. It's just for me. Really, it's something I enjoy to do. It's a hobby too, and you know, but it is not hurtful. But one thing I'll tell the young musicians out there, just keep your mind open, meaning transcription in jazz, we often refer to transcribing a solo, but transcription is more than that. Transcription is like you get called for a gig and you have to learn 40 tunes for next week, and this band doesn't have any charts. You need to learn the tunes from the record. That's transcribing. You get a call as a horn player. You say, come play in my band. There's sax and trumpet. Here, listen to this. Can you do an arrangement? You get to transcribe a big band or 5 horns and then arrange it. So there is or you want to learn a standard and you want to learn it not from the Facebook. You want to learn it from a record. So I never heard anybody say, don't listen to a record if you want to learn a tune. They're all going to say, you know, so when it comes to solo, it's a bit more sometimes people have different opinion, but transcription is really very helpful as far as being a pro, and then you hear more what's happening around you. You hear a chord, you know what it is, it's stuff like that.
It's funny that you quoted Joe Lovano, because he's also the one who says never practice with a metronome. But then
and he's amazing, and of course
he's unbelievable. But then you get people like Dave Douglas. When he came out to Melbourne a few years ago, he gave a 2 hours masterclass at the Monash University where I teach, and it was 2 hours masterclass on how to use the metronome. And it was amazing. It was beautiful. To hear such a great musician talking. This is how I practice, and I think the point here is that it's even the learning process. Of course, it's a very personal one, and we never fall into believing that there is one truth. There's not one truth. Everyone has his own approach, and I think also this podcast is highlighting the fact that every single person that I'm interviewing has a different approach. Luckily, so far, no one told me, "Oh, never transcribe. This podcast is a fraud."
I mean, also when I hear somebody like Joe or whoever, is saying, for instance, if somebody tells me, "Never use a metronome," well, in my head, I'm hearing from him, I never use the metronome.
Yes.
I'm translating, Somebody say, you should never transcribe. I'm hearing, I never transcribe. So I'm curious. So what did you do, So I turn it like that. It doesn't become an argument, How come you say that? Some people do it, So I'm more interested about how they evolve, how did you do it, Like you hear Joe Lovano practicing a scale, He played a scale for me. It's just like, it's like, He plays a scale like totally rubato and beautiful. And that's the way we practice scale. So it's very interesting because he's such a lyrical player. And you can hear in his playing, that's part of his approach, And other people are very, like Chris Potter is very, metric and, rhythmic. Doesn't mean he practiced with a metronome, but his approach is different, the kind of thing he practiced and all that. So that's interesting.
But also, I remember that when Joe Lovano published that album called Celebrating Sinatra,
yes,
based on songs that Sinatra used to sing, I can't remember whether it was an interview or inside the liner notes. He says, whenever I want to learn a song, I try to see whether Frank sang that note, and I learn from him. So he might, this is a little contradiction, because to me, that's transcribing. If you want to learn a song and you go to a singer and you listen to that song like 50 times till the point where you can start playing it, that's transcribing to me. It's like memorizing the sound, memorizing the intervals, the rhythm, and then being able to replicate what you heard.
I mean, you have to keep in mind that when somebody like when I asked him why not, he said he did not want the kids to learn a solo and go on stage and try to replicate. And sometimes somebody would say don't use a metronome because a band is. It's organic. Sometimes you don't want to go there and just try to play too strict. So I think, the way I see it, I've been teaching, for, 30 something years, So I'm a pedagogue, I got to you need to give the students, the young musician, different perspective. But when you're a player, you haven't teach that much, not as much as somebody like me. You know what I mean? Like I've been teaching a lot, and so your approach as a player is pretty much like what you do. It's not like I used when I was younger. I used to teach what I did, but as you get older and more experienced, you teach differently. You don't necessarily teach what you do. You teach what you think the kid would need at that moment in their life. So it's kind of more, so you have to keep that in mind. You meet people that are like Jerry Berganzi, is a real experienced teacher, So his way of approaching is very open. Like, you can do this or that. He always say yes to all the answers. Would you practice? Would you transcribe a solo with your sax? Would you just sing it? Would you write it? Would you not write it? Would you do it in different key? You say yes to all those answers. Do it all. Everything is good. And I believe in that philosophy. So that's okay. I mean,
Yeah. So Remi,
yeah.
How do you choose the solos you transcribe?
Well, I mean, in terms of the one I've been doing lately, I'm doing Charlie Parker. Actually, I got all the recordings of Charlie Parker in some folders in order from beginning to the end. And that was from a great pianist and drummer in Montreal called Andre White. And I think he got those from Pata Barbara. Okay. So when I received, yeah, exactly. So when I received that, I'm like, because Charlie Parker, there is a lot of bootlegs and different records. It's hard to what comes where. And actually, some of I'm checking out some recording. Sometimes they're almost a tone off. They put them on record and something happened, like in the speed of the recording, they're really off key, So I go through that, and I also restore the recording using a program, trying to make them sound a bit better. And so that just kind of got me going, where I decided to transcribe them all in order, So I did like 300 something so far. And so that's the way I did those. Otherwise, before, like I did a drum solo, Brian Blade this year, and that was just a challenge. It's very hard for me to do that. And I figured, I was teaching improvisation, and drummers have to transcribe a drum solo, and I figured I'll do it too, And so that was a challenge. The one you talked about with Brad Meldau and Josh Redman, that was a challenge. Saxophone solo for me, of course, it's pretty easy. But piano is difficult, And I did some McCoy, some Herbie, Chick Corea, and transcribing Hank Jones, So those are more challenging. And so basically I do it for the challenge.
Okay. So, of course, I believe also you like what you hear. You want to transcribe.
I take a solo I like.
Yeah, that's usually my first recommendation when a student asks me, what solo should I transcribe? I say, anything you like.
Yeah.
Because if you have to spend hours and hours listening like 500 times to something that it doesn't resonate with you, that's a hard time that you are giving to yourself. Unless you want to take a hard challenge. But yes, that's I believe that when you pick a solo, it's also because you like what you hear, and maybe you want to understand a little bit better what's behind.
Yeah, of course. There is some of that. The one with Brad Meldau, I'm like, wow, that's a rhythm changes. What is he doing? So it's interesting to and hear. And I hear a chord, and I'm like, wow, what is that chord? I find that very interesting to transcribe it, and to try to figure it out, And that's part of the process. For sure.
So now to start going into a more practical side of the questions, what methodology do you put in place when you transcribe, and do you use like any software, or do you write it immediately when you transcribe, or first you learn it from memory and then you write it down? You take 4 bars, 1 line, 1 phrase, 2 bars. So explain what is your process, what is your methodology?
Right. So it depends. Like right now, I'm doing it differently than I did try different ways, So I definitely, at one point, I remember singing a Charlie Parker solo, and when I could sing it, then take my horn and play it, That takes some time, but that was something I wanted to do. And other times where I would transcribe, but 1 bar at a time, and make sure I played it, just played it as I moved along, not transcribe too quickly. So I actually practiced the solo. And when I could play it, I keep moving forward. That's when I was younger. Now, in those days, I'm most interested to just write it down, and I'm very quick at it. If I make coffee, I have my toast in the morning. I have time to transcribe the whole solo, put it online before I take a bite.
That's a perfect breakfast.
So I'm, 20 minutes, it's done, so I don't just sing it. So what I do, actually, there is a video. I made a video online on my channel where you can see I explain exactly what software and how I do it, but basically I use a program called Transcribe. That's a software that enables you to open WAV files and put markers, see where the bars are, so I can lay down the form with the bars. So I start with that. I usually open the recording, make sure it's in tune, it's in the right, in those old recordings, sometimes it's not, you can adjust the pitch of the whole thing. And once that's done, I use a program called Finale. It's like Sibelius, a notation program. So I got Finale on the top of my computer, Transcribe in the bottom. And then I organize my Finale page, open the page, put staffs. And if it's, let's say, Donnelly, I put the chords in. Everything is there. So then I just basically start the recording, listen. I mean, with Parker, I can usually listen at least one bar, and then I just write it.
Yeah.
So, ba-ba-doo-ba-dap, so I write ba-ba-doo-ba-dap, and I'm quick at it so I don't have to look forever for the notes. Sometimes when it's fast, sometimes I could slow it down. If it's very fast and unclear, then I would. But usually I do it at the regular speed, unless it's too fast. If you do it slower, you have to be careful because the rhythms could be slower is good, not too slow, because you'll start to hear notes that are not actually played. A sax player, for instance, could play a B and a C, but if it's not perfectly in sync, you'll hear C sharp in the middle.
Yeah.
And if you go you'll start to hear all kinds of notes, like you'll hear too many notes. So it's good to have a certain speed. And then when it comes down to rhythm, then I usually put it at the right speed, because with the layback feel and everything, slow, sometimes you don't get the right flow, And so I use different programs. I use Transcribe. When it's for saxophone, I don't need anything else. I could use other programs if I'm doing piano and I find it very difficult to hear. Then basically, I'm just very good at cheating. My goal is to do it as quickly as possible. That's my goal right now. I don't want to spend like 3 weeks on a solo. I'm like, okay, so if I can't, there is a program I'll use sometime. There is different one. One is called Anthem Score.
Anthem. Like national anthem.
Is there somewhere I can write so you can see those things, or in the chat, or?
Okay, yeah, I will put also in the description of the podcast.
If I open chat like that, can you see it if I write the name of it? Okay, so that one is called Anthem Score. You see that?
Yeah, like national anthem.
So this, basically, I mean, if you put the whole song, it takes forever, but sometimes I'll take one chord and then port it in that program. And that program will show you notes. Like, it's kind of like Transcribe does that. It guesses the note in the bottom. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that program.
No.
I mean, do you want me to show some stuff or just talking about it? What's better?
You can talk and explain as much as you
I'll
like.
explain.
Yeah.
So basically, Transcribe has a keyboard in the bottom, and when you highlight a chord, the keyboard would have dots over the notes that are being played. Except there is way too many notes, because the drums are notes, everything is a note, so it's like tons of notes. But sometimes, the main note, sometimes that could be helpful. Sometimes you see a note there, it's like, wow, I didn't hear that note, so sometimes it's helpful. But Anthem Score is better at that. It'll remove some of the notes that are not notes. It's not perfect, of course, but it's definitely helpful. to double check something. Sometimes like, okay, all right, I hear that note, because there is natural overtones in piano. Sometimes if it's a live recording, you know, a pianist would know. He say, oh no, that's impossible. You would not repeat that note. That's not the piano voicing that we like. A pianist, that fifth you hear is an harmonic, you know. So that's why it's good to not be scared to make mistake, because when I do a transcription, if a pianist look at it, he tells me, look, that's not right. I'm like, great, you know, tell me, you know, I want to know, you know, so I don't mind, and I'm learning as I go. Another program I'll use is called Isotope. Isotope. Yep. This program, I use it to restore recording, remove background noises.
You mean RX is the name of, by Isotope is the brand, is the
RX. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. RX8. I'm using Isotope RX8. There is something there called music rebalance, and what that does, you can remove, like you can say, remove drums, remove, or just keep the drum, or just keep the bass, or just remove vocal. Like it enable you to remix a stereo mix. It's not perfect.
Does it work with jazz too?
Yeah.
Because I've been trying another software called Neural Mix.
I don't know that one.
And it does the same. So you can remove the voice, you can remove the harmony, you can remove the rhythm section from a track.
Can you give me the name? I want to know.
Yeah, Neural Mix. But so far, I was only able to work with like pop tracks.
Right.
So I tried with even with a singer, you know, jazz singer in a quartet. Sometimes it doesn't pick, you know, just the voice. I mean,
it's not good enough to do a track that you're going to be using live. You know? It could be, you know, but still, I mean, sometimes you'll hear things you don't hear. I mean, I thought it was. I mean, if I take a Parker recording, it's so old. I mean, if I just listen to what is supposed to be the saxophone, I'll hear bass and drums in there too, you know. But I could lower the drum sound. It would remove those big bass drum, boom, boom, sometime on those old recordings, and it make it more enjoyable to listen to. But I did use it on drum solo, like, you know, just take a Coltrane solo and I say solo drums. And it was pretty impressive, I tell you. Like I sent that to some drummers, like, wow, what's that? You know, that's that program. Did you had to change anything? No, I just said solo drum, click on the button, and it did it. And yeah, there was some leaking, but I mean, it could help.
And this is music rebalance you are talking about. Music rebalance. Okay.
The problem, it's like vocal, bass, drums, and then sax and piano are together, you know. So if it's a quartet, you cannot say just piano, you know. But still, you know. So sometimes I'll use that if I'm like having a hard time. Like when I did the drum transcription, I used some of it, you know, to hear more clearly if it's some drums behind, you know, other instruments, you know. So that's something. There is another program called Melodyne. Have you heard about that one?
Yeah, that works on Pro Tools, right?
Yeah, and I just use it as itself. I mean, this is one program again that you can fix notes if you do a recording, even a live recording, and the piano or a sax player make a wrong note, you can move that note. So again, you see the notes.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you have a chord, you can look at it and say, you know, except again, there is way too many notes, you know. I mean, I don't use it that much, you know, but I mean, those are programs that I have. I use more those programs. Melodyne, I use more to fix a recording I did for my live gig or something that I want to keep. And I can fix the third alto made a mistake, you know, second alto made a mistake, sorry. And I can fix that note sometimes, stuff like that. I would say the program I usually stay with Transcribe and sometimes use for piano. The one I use the most is Anthem Score.
Yeah. Good. There are some good tips here for all our listeners. I guess you have already answered to the question whether you write it down immediately or not. We have already talked, so I will skip that question. do you practice the solos you transcribe, or you just move on once you have finished with one transcription?
It depends. I mean, when I was younger, again, yes, 100% for sure. I would practice, take me forever. I mean, Coltrane, Marsh, solo took me I transcribe some Arnett Coleman solo, crazy fast stuff, eventually and stuff like that. And very hard to play. And I practiced it until I could play it. And I transcribed some piano solo at the time. And I practiced the top note, just try to play it. And I used to basically spend a lot of time to learn those solos, So I did. Nowadays, I mean, in those days, I'm actually reading through the Parker, I finished that first volume. That's like 600 pages, of solos. So I'm just putting it on and I just read, I mean, I don't need to practice it that much if I play a Parker solo, maybe some parts, but most of it I can just play,
Yeah. Are you going to publish those solos?
I'm not sure, I mean, honestly, I'm not sure. I mean, it's all online. It's all you can go on YouTube and hear all the solos. They are in order with the recordings, the audio. And I'm thinking maybe, that would be many volumes. I mean, just the first part, there probably 10, I'm thinking to print it out and just give it to McGill, and then it's somewhere available. If McGill digitalize it, so it's available. So when I pass away, it's not gone from my computer, and that's it. You know what I mean? It's like there is a lot of solos I have. I don't feel that comfortable to sell, somebody else solos, even if I could sometimes. You know what I mean? It's not. I don't know. It's not something I feel that comfortable with. I mean, I'm a teacher. I make a living. I don't want to. I don't know.
I understand.
People ask me.
I think it's just something that you can do to make transcribing, which we love doing, also a bit profitable. You can, or maybe even, as you said, you like do it as a donation to an institution, and then it's there available for the people.
Yeah,
it's a lot of work, to transcribe.
Yeah, I mean, but I understand it totally. I mean, I have some friends that publish and do books and whatnot. Maybe one day I want to do it, but even that's a bit time consuming for me. And I'm full time in the university, full time professor.
Yeah.
So I don't. It's not something I'm not. It depends on your situation. For me, I enjoy it a lot.
That's great. That's good. So I think you sort of talked about this at the beginning of our episode, about the fact that sometimes I heard people or even students saying, is it transcribing a good thing? Because sometimes I feel like I'm copying someone else. I don't want to sound as someone else. So I want to keep original. So this is why I never transcribe. Now, my personal reaction is that that person is a bit lazy, maybe, or has never, developed the skill of transcribing at a faster pace, so he get overwhelmed by the experience and decides to give up transcribing, and makes an excuse that, I want to keep my playing as fresh as possible and personal and original. So have you ever felt that you were going towards that danger of becoming a replica of someone else?
No, and I always transcribe many players, and it never happened to me. I would say that when you hear an argument, when some players say, I don't want to transcribe, it's usually not because they don't want to sound like somebody else. They don't want to transcribe because they don't need to transcribe, but they want to listen to a lot of music. Because the thing is, transcribing is just writing down what you hear. So it is saying, I don't want to transcribe because I'm going to start to sound like Charlie Parker. It would be saying, I don't want to sound like Charlie Parker, therefore I will not listen to him. And I will not listen to Coltrane, and I won't listen to nobody because I want to be personal. Then I would say, the great musician that I met that did not transcribe listened to a lot of music. They were never scared to listen to, go live and listen to Joe Henderson and the time, and Sonny Rollins and whoever they could listen, and the records, and it was never an issue. Oh, I'm gonna sound too much like Coltrane if I listen to him too much. So transcribing is a bit the same. It's like listening, except you write it down. I mean, so when somebody tells me if that's what they do, I would say, well, maybe when you transcribe that you do too much of it. Maybe that's all what you do. Because I transcribe in the morning, but I mean, the rest of the day, I practice all kind of things, different rhythms, different harmony, different technical ideas. I learn new tunes. I do so many other things. So I don't have time to sound like that morning solo, but if all you do is play that solo and then you go on stage and you try to play it, then but that doesn't mean you should not ever transcribe. But if you don't want to, don't. But I would say, don't close your ears to listen to great musicians. There was a lot of history before you. You want to learn what happened,
And one sort of common thread that is coming out from the podcast is that whenever professional players have tried to use a phrase or a lick that is coming from a transcription in one of their live performances, it's always not coming out too well, or is not the effect that you would have hoped for. Because in that moment, you can't simply take something and put it in a context that is completely different from the origin of that phrase or that lick. So this is important to remember. But I also want to add that those people that are saying they never transcribe, I suspect that you are 100% right when you say they don't write it down, but they listen to a lot of music. So in a sense, they transcribe as well. Or if not, if they don't think that they are transcribing, I mean, when they play, and when we all play, especially jazz and improvised music, what we do is actually to transcribe what you have in your head in that moment. You hear a line, and then you're able to transfer that sound that you can imagine, because it's somewhere there, and you can transfer it to your instrument. So that's a kind of real transcription of yourself. That we are doing every time.
100% with you on that. Same with sound. When you imitate the sound when you're younger, I would listen to somebody Cannonball and try to sound like Cannonball. Then you start to be able to do that a bit, because that helps you after to play the sound that you have in your head. That process, you hear something and you do it. Sometimes by imitating a bit, I think, the thing with improvisation is the same with technique. I have many students, they would work on different patterns and different scales and whatnot. And the question is always, how do you use it? How do you do to be able to integrate those sounds in your playing? Same thing with improvisation, with transcription. How do you integrate it? I would say, I tried many techniques, but I would say ultimately at the end, just the process of learning different ideas under your fingers and to transcribe or learn solos and all that, I have faith that it just makes me a better player. So I'm not trying to play it. I'm not trying. I don't have to. It just eventually make you a more rounded player. You're a better sax player if you're better on your instrument by being able to transpose any ideas. So even if you don't play that line or that scale, you're getting better at transposing everything and all that. It just gives you something. And so it's not sometimes direct. If you try to do it too directly, as you say, you're playing and then you play a lick, but then it's like, oh, what am I gonna say now? Because you kind of lost the flow, you know. So you want to follow a flow when you improvise an idea and develop it. If you insert, you know. But mind you, I heard players that could do that and did it quite well, you know. Players that played their licks and they're good at it. You know, they sounded. I mean, Parker played his licks.
Yes.
Well, you know, he put them together in different way, but he played, and you, in a way, use some of the same vocabulary. And I was having a conversation with Jerry Bergonzi about that, and Jerry said, imagine a player that have unlimited vocabulary. He can play anything, anytime on his instrument. You know, it's never the same. You say you probably would never recognize that player. You would not have any identity. It would be like, who's this player? I have no idea. I never heard him before. You know, so to repeat yourself, to have certain things that you do, it's what makes you, you know. And I thought that was very, you know, deep, you know.
And Dave Liebman once told me at a lesson that the vocabulary of one player, it can be reduced to like 10 main ideas.
Yeah, I've heard him say that too, yeah.
And I was shocked when he said that, because I said, nah, that's impossible. I mean, you take like Sonny Rollins, Coltrane, you know, Clifford Brown, and there's more than 10 ideas. But then you start transcribing them. And the more you do, now you are doing like the Opera Omnia on Parker, but if you take any player and you do, even if you do only like 3-4 solos of that player, you start seeing and you start counting, and it's, oh, that's number one. Oh, here it is, number one. Oh, next track. Oh, there is 3 number 1 and 2 number 2 phrases. And you can hear, and to me what is great is to see the ability of the player to take the number 1 idea and to make it sound as 10 different things. Every time is a little bit different, but the core of the idea is the same.
And also those 10 things, it's not only lines. Sometimes that player, the way the rhythm you use, sometimes the way you bend the note, the way you go towards the bottom, you know. So there is like few things too like that, that you recognize somebody when somebody does that. Oh yeah, I remember that player. Either to the left, to the left, to the left. You hear that, you know. So the note could be different, but the shape is the same and stuff like that, you know. And yeah, that's, I remember David Demon saying that in the master class.
And you also must have developed the skill of reading my mind, because that was the next question, how to incorporate, you know, what you transcribe into your playing. Do you have any particular exercise that you usually recommend? Or you just say, play?
I tried so many, you know, like, okay, I'll give right now, I take a line that I like and I compose a study with it, a study that's not in the tune. And I put them online. You can find them on Facebook. I have a link there, and I have like a bunch of those. So this way, that line, I make it more my own. I'll take somebody's solo, a line that I like, and I'll kind of adapt it so I can hear, let's say, in a cadenza, let's say 2/5, and I have a list of tunes that if I play those tunes, I cover 12 key minor, 12 key majors, and I can do it, you know, in 10 minutes, you know. So I do that. Sometime I would, in the days, take a line, of course, transpose it, improvise, start with the line, try to go somewhere else, and different things like that, you know. But at the end, even if I do all this, and I enjoy doing it, you know. When I play live, I'm not sure if I ever use them if I don't think about it. But again, I don't care about that. I mean, I'm just, if you tell me, okay, here, Remi, take this line, I take my horn, I learn the line, I'm just much faster at saying, okay, here it is in 12 keys, you know. Okay, here I can play it in all the things where I can play it in Cherokee, I can do it, you know, not on the spot, but some lines, yes, I can do it on the spot. And it doesn't mean I will play that line, but means if I improvise a line, I can transpose it. I can hear it in different places. I'm just getting better at that. I think the skill of transposition is very important for an improviser, and to hear different chromatism. And so eventually you just become better at that by doing this. So that's why, you know. So I don't care so much now. But when you're younger, I used to take specific line and really learn them in 12 keys, try to play them in tunes. And when you start, you don't have that much vocabulary. So you pretty much sometimes have to use those, you know. But the more you develop your vocabulary, eventually you're able to make it through tunes without having to think about that. So the new things that you look at will go in, but you know, sometimes they don't, but you just get better at have more vocabulary, basically, you know. I mean, that's my answer. I never found the perfect method to say it just comes out like, you know, here it is. Some people do it better than others. Me, it never felt natural when I did that. I always felt out of my mindset when I improvise. I don't like the way I feel if I start to do a line like that. I'm more like, when I play live, I like to listen. Like, for instance, I'm never in the monitor. If I do a record, I'm not in the headphones. I don't like to listen to myself that much. I want to listen to the others and then react to that. And so I don't want to think too much about what I'm doing, you know. And that's kind of the way I do it, you know. So starting to think about putting a line here and there, just doesn't, right? But I mean, I'm not against the idea when some people do it, you know. If they do it well, I'm like, wow, you know, because I love when people do it different things, different ways. You know, I find that's interesting. Not everybody's the same.
No, I do agree.
Like Michael Brecker plays some lines, right? Like some lines like he have under his fingers. You have some stuff he plays, you know, like often, and it sounds great, you know. And he plays some motifs sometimes. You can tell he worked on them. Yeah. And he put them in a solo, and it sounds very good. Like, I can never do that. But I love, you know, the way it sounds, you know. I'm like, wow, you know, I transcribe a lot of Michael Brecker. I'm like, wow, this is awesome, you know. But other players, you don't say, Joe Lovano, he always played this line, this motif. He's not kind of like that. He's more like abstract in his approach, you know. It's a different type of player. The Chris Potter, you hear motif. You can say, oh, he's doing that here. Grouping of 5, and that's a motif. Down by tone, down by semitone. You can hear it. You can, Donnie McCaslin too has motif. You know, so it depends on the player. Everybody sounds different, you know, and I enjoy to see the way you learn and the way you approach it make you sound unique, basically.
Yeah, I do agree completely. And I remember
no argument here tonight, Mirko.
You mentioned Michael Brecker, and I remember a masterclass, a workshop with him, and he was the fastest player I have ever heard, being able to transpose any line in any key in an eye blink. And I remember he was doing it so fast that one of the students asked him, like, why you play so fast? You know, we are humans. These students say so, and Brecker said, you know, I don't know, but I have to do it fast. I don't have a reason. I know. I would love to, you know, slow it down a little bit, but after a while, it's like I can't control my fingers anymore. It was funny. It was a different angle, you know.
Well, I remember, like, I played with Ben Monder, he's a guitar player, and Ben plays some solo music that's very hard to play on guitar, right? Yeah. And I remember in the days, he used to practice so much, you know, like serious amount of hours a day, you know. And I tell him, wow, why do you write music that's so hard to play? You know, he say, I have to practice that much to be able to play that music, you know, because it's so hard. And I said, why? You know, he said, I want to, but, you know, that's what I hear, you know. You know, and that's a simple answer. I mean, that's in his head. That's it. You know?
Sometimes you can help yourself.
That's what he hears. So
do it. Yes.
You can force, you know, you play a certain way, and you just want better playing, you know. So that's it, you know. You're not there to play what everybody wants you to play. You want to develop your personality.
Yeah. So we are towards the end of our episode. I have the last question, which is the dumb question that I ask to all my guests. And with you, it will be interesting because you have a massive library of solos that you transcribed. So the question is, which of the solos you transcribed is your favorite and why? I know it's hard to reply, but just for fun, just try to name a couple of solos and give us a couple of reasons.
Well, I mean, you're right. I transcribe so many. I mean, the answer that comes to mind, it's this morning I transcribed "Busy" from Parker from May 8th, 1947, and yesterday I think I did 2 or 3 versions of Cheryl that he did, and I would say those are right now my favorite because when I played them, I took my horn and played them, and I just helped me to make sense of music. It just made me sound better. Like after I started to improvise my music, which is completely different, and I just it's kind of like made the more abstract ideas more simple, more concrete. It's something, it's an inspiration that I'm writing right now some studies that are very modern, and I don't use a horn. I sing and I write it down, da 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 da. I write it down. I could not do that before, and it's just since I do Parker. It's funny how Parker is more inside, and it makes me hear things, differently. So right now, I guess the one I'm doing, I find that those are my favorite. Yeah. I mean, if I go back, I did others in the past, but I just find they're the one that's staying with me. I guess they're fresh, but I find it amazing. Yeah. I find Parker the most inspiring solos that I did, like the one that bring me the most, not because I know the notes, and I don't know, there is something when you put yourself into it as much as I've been doing. There is something there that's magic, that kind of, it goes through you. And then when you play, suddenly you feel you have more ideas, you feel better, There is something very inspiring and about that, And I find that surprising because I heard so much of it before, but I never transcribed as much as I did now. And it's something very inspiring. And of course, I learned a lot. I'm not going to go on, but I learned things that I don't think you could figure out if you just transcribe one solo. I did so many, I could see night after night. Sometime I did 15 solo of that one evening, all in order, 15 solo a night, so I can really see what happened, how we develop live, not in a practice room, because he was doing like 25 tunes a night every day in that period. So he doesn't have much time to practice, but you can hear how he evolved night after night just from playing. And that's inspiring too. Just playing, you take a tune, play, and you'll evolve. You don't need to write everything and figure out everything sometime. Just play, and something gonna come out, I find that inspiring too. So that was my answer would be Charlie Parker. May 8th, when he came back from California in New York, recording with Miles Davis, Donnelly, and all that session, that's where I'm at right now. I find that very inspiring.
Thank you, Remi, and it has been a real pleasure to talk to you today. And I will put all the references and also your website and your
actually
YouTube
the website
channel.
is down, so you have to go on Facebook to see all my stuff now. But I have YouTube. YouTube, I got hundreds of video in there.
We will go on Facebook, and I will put the YouTube channel details in the podcast description. Thanks again for being with us as a guest doctor for the clinic today, Remi Bolduc, ladies and gentlemen, and we hear each other next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, Mirko. Bye, everyone.